You know, life is fundamentally a confrontation with chaos, and nowhere is that chaos more acute, more complex, more emotionally layered than in the domain of interpersonal relationships, especially with women. When a woman hurts you, and she will, because she's human and because you're imperfect, the average man's reaction is to retaliate, retreat, or implode. But I'd argue there's a far more productive route. You must confuse her, but not in a petty or manipulative way. I mean something much more sophisticated than that. You confuse her by refusing to play the game she's anticipating. You step outside of the typical pattern, the script of blame, outrage, or withdrawal, and instead you become a force of integrated psychological order. When someone hurts you, your instinct is to protect yourself, but protection without understanding is just fear dressed up as pride. Emotional pain, especially from someone close, isn't random. It's data. Most men treat emotional wounds as attacks to counter instead of puzzles to decode. If you're not asking why you were hurt, you've already lost control of the dialogue within yourself. Pain is not merely a signal to run, it's a signal to listen. The surface of an argument is never its foundation. What she says might be sharp, but what she means is buried under layers of unspeakable complexity. You must be the kind of man who's capable of listening beneath the noise. The action is animal, reflection is human. If you react first, you've chosen the lowest road available to you. But if you understand first, you gain dominion over the moment. Power without understanding is tyranny. But understanding without immediate action, that's discipline. A woman doesn't hurt you in a vacuum. Her words are often symptoms of unspoken discontent, unmet needs, or internal conflict she hasn't mapped herself. If you absorb the pain and study it, you'll find blueprints to a larger emotional structure, hers and yours. And there's nothing more dangerous than a man who can stay calm inside someone else's storm. We live in a world that rewards speed, but emotional intelligence is about slowing time. The split second between the insult and your reaction is the throne of your sovereignty. If you fill it with rage, you become predictable. If you fill it with silence and inquiry, you become formidable. There is nothing weak about feeling hurt. Denying pain doesn't make you strong, it makes you blind. You must develop the courage to name your wound, trace its origin, and then assess its meaning. Not every hurt is her fault. Sometimes her words press against old scars, father wounds, adolescent humiliation, or shame you've refused to clean. The hurt you feel is not just from what she said, it's from what it echoed inside you. If your first instinct is to silence her, you've already silenced yourself. And if you demand understanding without first offering it, you're chasing justice without integrity. Emotions are not enemies, they are ancient messengers, and most men are at war with their messengers. The smarter man doesn't fight emotion, he interrogates it. He holds it up to the light, not to shame it, but to learn from it. To understand her motivation, you must stop seeing her as an adversary and start seeing her as an enigma. Not every conflict is war. Sometimes it's a broken compass trying to find true north in the dark. When she lashes out, it might not be hatred, it might be fear dressed up as fire. Men are taught to conquer, but in the emotional realm, the victory is in comprehension, not control. If you dominate her without understanding her, you've won nothing but silence. And silence isn't peace. It's the graveyard of intimacy. You cannot fix what you refuse to understand. You cannot grow from what you quickly dismiss. You cannot connect with someone whose pain you never make space for. And understanding is space. It is the deliberate pause between her emotion and your judgment. A woman tests to feel safe. She argues to feel seen. She prods not because she enjoys chaos, but because she wants truth strong enough to survive conflict. If you flinch every time she gets sharp, you reveal to her a fragility she cannot trust. Understanding isn't agreement. You can fully grasp someone's motivation and still set boundaries. But if you set boundaries without clarity, they're not boundaries, they're walls, and walls keep you alone. Understanding disarms the false enemy and reveals the real one: miscommunication, misalignment, or internal fragmentation. If you listen deeply, you'll hear that her anger often masks a longing. You'll see that the cutting remark was a test of emotional depth, not a weapon of destruction. And if you pass that test, not by submission, but by stillness, you become the container for her chaos, not the casualty of it. It takes immense strength to stay curious when you're wounded, but that's what makes a man rare. That's what creates polarity, respect, even awe. The ability to take emotional fire and convert it into relational fuel is alchemical. When she sees that her words didn't collapse you, but activated your capacity for clarity, she won't know what to do, because very few men know how to do that, and fewer still do it consistently. You become, in that moment, a kind of psychological mirror, not reflecting her fire, but absorbing it, decoding it, and then responding from sovereignty. Men who don't understand women suffer endlessly, not because women are cruel, but because women are complex. And complexity doesn't yield to force, it yields to presence. Your presence in that moment is the test, not your dominance, not your anger, not your withdrawal, but your grounded, alert stillness. If you cannot understand her when she's at her worst, you haven't earned her when she's at her best. Anyone can love harmony. Few can love through confusion. And fewer still can grow through it. You must stop interpreting her emotional volatility as a verdict on your worth. It is often a storm of her own past colliding with the architecture of the present. If you take it personally, you miss the point. If you make it personal, you make it worse. But if you explore it, you evolve through it. There's an archetype in every woman that longs for a man who can hold the tension between emotion and logic, who doesn't rush to pacify her, silence her, or shame her, but listens with a kind of sacred intensity. A man like that can turn a fight into a revelation. When you understand before reacting, you shift the terrain. She is no longer battling a boy seeking validation. She's standing in front of a man who seeks truth. And truth is terrifying to those who are used to manipulation or avoidance. If you want a woman to trust you, she must see that you're not just powerful when calm, but powerful when challenged. She must see that your hurt doesn't deform you, it informs you. That your mind is not just sharp, but open. That your heart is not just guarded, but curious. Only then do you stand a chance to create something that transcends the common drama of modern relationships. Because now you're not reacting from ego, you're responding from understanding. And that's not just rare. You were not born to be a tyrant, and you were not born to be a doormat. You were born to walk the razor's edge between chaos and order, to be the stabilizing force when emotion threatens to tear the room apart. Strength without control is a threat. Control without strength is an illusion. When she tests you, she isn't looking for fear, she's looking for form. The modern man has forgotten that calm is the ultimate weapon. He confuses silence with weakness and dominance with respect. But neither aggression nor passivity creates trust. What creates trust is presence, sharpened into clarity, not through force, but through the unshakable confidence that comes from self-mastery. You are not required to explode to prove that you feel. You are not required to suppress to prove that you're evolved. You are required to contain, to direct, to take all the energy boiling inside of you and organize it into speech that cuts through confusion like a scalpel. Not to destroy, but to reveal. When she pushes you, don't flinch and don't retaliate. Study her. She is not trying to unman you. She's trying to see if you know who you are. She doesn't need to win the argument. She needs to feel that you are anchored in something deeper than pride, that your identity is not held together by her validation or broken by her disapproval. A man who cannot contain emotional intensity without becoming reactive is a liability to himself and to others. She will not trust you if she sees you dissolve under pressure. Not because she wants you to be emotionless, but because she needs to know that you can lead when the lights go out. Order is not silence, it is not cold, it is not distant. Order is the fierce alignment between thought, speech, and action. It is speaking only what is necessary, but with a voice that makes the room stop moving. It is the steadiness of your breath while storms rage around you. It is presence forged through pain. You confuse her not by overpowering her, but by not needing to. She expects your ego to rise, your volume to rise, your need to be right to rise. But when you sit back, breathe deep, and articulate your truth without flinching, she is forced to meet you in a space she did not expect. A space ruled not by dominance, but by depth. You do not raise your voice to be heard, you raise your integrity to be undeniable. And that integrity is built in the private battles where you chose understanding over fury, direction over confusion, stillness over chaos. When you bring that into the room, you become an axis around which conflict begins to dissolve. The masculine principle is not brute force. It is structure. It is the invisible spine that holds the house up when emotion floods every floor. She may try to shake you, not to destroy you, but to find out if you're real. If your strength is performative or integrated. She wants to feel the ground beneath her feet, and sometimes the only way she knows to test it is by shaking it. If you collapse, she cannot relax. If you dominate, she cannot breathe. But if you stand, not over her, not against her, but in full presence with her, she will remember something ancient, something sacred. The balance of polarity that most have forgotten in this age of emotional warfare and spiritual amnesia. To assert your order is not to control her, it is to control yourself in front of her. That is not repression, that is refinement. You show her what a man looks like when he refuses to become a slave to his emotions without denying their existence. You show her that fire doesn't have to burn. It can illuminate. You are not here to win, you are here to be true. And your truth, when spoken from clarity rather than competition, reorganizes the entire dynamic. You become a mirror so precise that she cannot help but see herself clearly. That's confusing to her, but only because it's rare. You must become a man who is unmovable, not because he is rigid, but because he is rooted. The storm does not move the mountain, it dances around it. That's the kind of presence that commands respect without demanding it. That's the kind of authority that comes from the inside out, not the outside in. You cannot expect to lead if you need to dominate. Leadership begins with internal congruence. When what you think, what you say, and what you do are perfectly aligned, people feel it, especially her. She will feel it, not as fear, but as trust, not as control, but as invitation. It is possible to be firm and kind in the same sentence, to be clear and soft in the same breath. That contradiction is where real masculinity is born, not in being hard, not in being cold, but in being so stable that kindness becomes strength instead of vulnerability. A woman will challenge you not because she's against you, but because she needs to know you won't vanish. She needs to know that your presence isn't conditional on her approval, that you don't fold when her tone sharpens or when her love withdraws. She needs to know you lead even when it's uncomfortable. There is an archetype inside every man that longs to command his environment with grace rather than force, but most never cultivate it because it requires sacrifice. You must give up your need to control, your need to be liked, your need to win, and you must replace those needs with a hunger for truth. Truth destabilizes lies. Truth breaks emotional patterns. Truth offends egos. Truth strips everything down to its bones. And when you speak it, not to shame, but to liberate, you are no longer operating in a personal conflict. You are embodying a principle. That's what creates transformation. Dominance is reaction. Order is intention. One seeks to overpower the moment, the other seeks to guide it. You must become a man who guides, not with words alone, but with how he stands, how he listens, how he breathes. That kind of order cannot be faked. It is forged. The moment you speak with direction instead of aggression, you confuse the conflict into submission, because you're no longer playing the same emotional game. You've exited the pattern, and the person who exits the pattern first always holds the power, not over the other, but over the dynamic itself. You do not gain strength by suppressing the beast. You gain strength by taming it, by becoming a man who can summon intensity without becoming consumed by it. That is the essence of self-authority. That is how you become dangerous in the most benevolent sense. She may not say it aloud, but she craves your structure. Not your rules, not your commands, your structure. Your ability to stand in the fire without flinching, to speak without trembling, to be challenged without becoming a challenger. That presence doesn't diminish her. You become a lighthouse in her storm, not by controlling the sea, but by refusing to sink. You don't become loud to command attention. You become still to command gravity. That's how you assert order, not with noise, but with resonance. Not through fear, but through truth. And when you do that, she won't know whether to cry, respect you, or finally exhale, because she's finally met something stronger than her defense, something she didn't know she needed, something she'll never forget. Clarity is the rarest form of strength in a world addicted to reaction. When she lashes out, it's easy to mirror her emotion, but mirrors only reflect, they do not lead. You were not created to reflect chaos. You were created to reorganize it into something intelligible. Man governed by emotion is directionless in the presence of volatility, but a man governed by clarity becomes the still point in a turning world. She doesn't need your explosion, she needs your precision. When you respond with emotional volatility, you abandon the battlefield of logic and enter the arena of confusion. That's not where power is claimed, that's where it's lost. The moment you let her emotion dictate your internal state, you hand her the reins to your psyche. Power is not energy, it's direction. And direction is born in the furnace of clarity, not the waves of emotional impulsivity. If you do not know what you stand for in the moment of tension, you will be manipulated by every rising tone, every teardrop, every silence turned weapon. But if your words emerge from rooted conviction, not wounded ego, she will feel the difference in her nervous system before her mind can interpret it. Clarity cuts. It does not comfort, it exposes. It doesn't placate. And that is precisely what transforms the dynamic. She expects retaliation. She's prepared for withdrawal. But she isn't ready for a calm, clear statement that turns the argument into a mirror of her own projections. You do not yell to establish dominance. You articulate your boundaries like someone who knows their worth is not up for negotiation. When you speak from clarity, you don't argue to be right, you reveal what's real. That revelation stings more than any raised voice because it calls her to accountability without assaulting her dignity. Your goal is not to overpower her with emotion, but to outclass her with awareness. If you bring more understanding than she brings chaos, you win before a word is spoken. But understanding is useless if it stays inside. It must translate into clarity, or you'll be just another man drowning in emotional fog. Emotional men often mistake intensity for impact. But true impact lives in how clearly you see the moment, how quickly you reduce noise to essence. You must become the kind of man who hears the story beneath the scream, but never confuses the scream for truth. Clarity lets you respond to the source, not the symptom. She does not expect your centeredness. She may provoke you, push you, even tempt you to become unstable. But if you stay grounded and return her chaos with calmly spoken truth, you change the game. Now she's dealing with something foreign. something unsettling, something deeply, deeply attractive. To gain power through clarity, you must first surrender the illusion that your emotions are always justified. You are allowed to feel them, but you are not allowed to be ruled by them if you want to lead. Emotional leadership begins where justification ends and responsibility begins. Clarity is not about being cold. It's about being conscious. It's about refusing to let the smoke of drama hide the architecture of dysfunction. You must be willing to name the dynamic without blaming the person. That is surgical power. And it demands far more discipline than shouting or shutting down. You must speak like a man who sees 10 moves ahead, not like a boy trying to win one argument. Every emotional reaction is a signal, but every clear statement is a strategy. She cannot manipulate what you've already made visible. And once the game is seen, it cannot be played the same way again. The power you gain from clarity is not the kind that silences her voice, it's the kind that neutralizes her chaos. You are not trying to win her over, you are trying to call her forward. And you can't do that by matching her emotional swings. You do it by embodying what she thought didn't exist. A man who sees without flinching. To see clearly, you must first clear yourself. Your old wounds, your reactive patterns, your childhood defenses masquerading as principles. Because if you speak from confusion, even the truth sounds like control. But when you speak from awareness, even confrontation becomes sacred. She may not understand your calm, she may mistake it for detachment. But what she's really experiencing is your refusal to be baited, your refusal to descend into narrative loops. Your refusal to let old programming decide new conversation. Power in the masculine is expressed not through emotional fireworks, but through laser-focused declarations. When you say, "This is what I see," with unwavering presence, the entire field shifts. The emotional charge evaporates, and what remains is a mirror, and most people cannot fight what they are forced to see. You are not reacting to her behavior. You are responding to the truth behind it. There's a vast difference. Reaction escalates. Response reveals. Reaction says, "I'm threatened." Response says, "I understand, and here's the standard." One seeks approval, the other reveals alignment. Emotional confusion is a loop. Clarity is a ladder. You don't escape the loop by running faster, you escape by climbing out. And to climb, you must become vertical in a world that's spinning sideways. You must rise internally so that you can offer perspective instead of panic. A woman will push to see if you push back, but if instead you step back, assess, and speak with unnerving precision, she loses the script. Because now you're not playing defense, you're not even playing offense. You've left the game entirely and invited her into a new one. You don't need to be emotionless to be clear. You need to be honest. You need to speak from vision, not from vengeance. The man who speaks from clarity takes up space without aggression. He commands respect without demanding it, and he creates gravity that no emotional outburst can overpower. Every time you speak clearly instead of loudly, you are teaching her what kind of man you are. Not with force, with frequency. Not by winning arguments, but by refusing to be pulled into battles that betray your values. That's how power is kept. Not through domination, but through discipline. Clarity forces reflection, emotion forces defense. If you want to lead her out of confusion, you must first refuse to be part of it. You must stand so clearly in your own authority that her chaos either organizes itself or walks away, unable to find a foothold. There is nothing more powerful than a man who understands himself so well that no insult surprises him, no emotion hijacks him, and no chaos confuses him. That man doesn't fight for power, he is power. Because clarity makes him immovable,